Welcome to the workshop. Today, we have some content that is different from our usual content. The reason we had to add these videos to our roster was simple. I have been a huge fan of The Wheel of Time since I was little when my mom would read them like bedtime stories, albeit somewhat censored. Which is why, when I found out that there were so many fans involved, and with many promises thrown in the mix, I was excited about the making of the Amazon Prime series. I had a lot of hope for it. Sure, before the show's release, there were some comments that gave me pause, but way more assurances. If you want a better breakdown of what I'm referring to, then take a look at the video description down below. I have since started watching the series. I'm pretty disappointed. I was expecting many changes. That was not a surprise, but I was not expecting a fan to lose the characters entirely and thus obliterate the heart of the story. Are these bold words coming from someone who has only seen the first episode? Well, let me explain why. I decided in the first episode to try and put the promises of Rafe Judkins, the showrunner, to the test. Nothing happens in that show without his approval. According to many of the remarks before the show, these changes are mostly budget, with a bit of book-to-screen issues and some need to speed things along sprinkled in. Well, challenge accepted, as today I attempt a rewrite that will be done one episode at a time in an attempt to match the pace of the show. As an added benefit, it should reveal that my rewrite won't work in the timeline and budget constraints of the show, or at least it will if I am wrong. As much as I doubt it, it might also reveal that I misjudged the show. As another note, the format of these videos might change over time, as I rushed this video out in an attempt to not fall further behind. Also, I wasn't able to devote as much time as I would like, also prepping and shooting our other content. This means that the edits could be pretty bad, since that is the part that I will be saving time by avoiding doing it. Last thing on this disclaimer, I have read the entire book series. So, if you haven't read the books, there's going to be heavy spoilers. Obviously, if you haven't watched the episode I'm covering, then there's likely to be spoilers for that too. Okay, so as I stated in the intro, this is a challenge. I only watch one episode at a time, and take my videos to the same endgame of the episode. This goal assumes that the show doesn't devolve so much that it is no longer recognizable, or so poorly done that its plot points are not worth reaching. Also, I haven't watched any reviews, video essays, or anything post-series release about the subject, since that would be cheating. I will avoid anything that would raise the budget to the best of my knowledge, and will be matching the pace of the show. Anytime I can reduce the budgetary load on the show, I will attempt to do so. I will also be asking your opinion on each rewrite, but take it easy on me. Remember that unlike the people who wrote the show, I didn't have 2 years, a full team, formal training, and I am working within the constraints that they didn't have to, namely, conforming to a TV show as it airs, episode by episode. I will do my best, though. I have only 1 week to prepare each episode, and I have other responsibilities each week, so I can't devote my full attention to the series. All said and done, game, set, match. Where we start and where we end. Rand heading into town, and the party leaving the village. My rewrite. The opening can stay mostly the same. It is a decent replacement to the flashback to the Age of Legends that we get in the book for a prologue. However, this is a prologue, and we should keep it to simply Moraine's narration, which, as I said, is a decent replacement. I wish I had time to give you my exact script and rewrite every word to make sure that this is optimized, but I think it's close enough that we won't really touch it. And I really don't have time to be making perfect scripts either. I'll try to reflect them with my brief explanations of each scene. This next part, however, can be cut out. After the intro, or the prologue, as it would be referred to in the book, we get this scene with the Red Aja. This can be cut entirely. It doesn't provide any useful information to us. These are things that we shouldn't know yet. See, the prologue, or the intro in the series, gives us information that the characters would already know. That's the purpose of exposition, when you can't relate it to the viewer without making it feel awkward. And that means that Rand and company are supposed to be naive to the world, and that is when we learn things. Because they don't know things, we learn things when they do, in a natural way. That way, the entire book doesn't have to be exposition. Therefore, after the intro, this scene propels us past the knowledge of the boys, which is a literary mistake. Now, we begin our episode with Rand, as we do in the books, with his dad walking. It is good enough that we start here with what they have in the show. We're giving them the benefit of the doubt and saying that they can't afford to have it be permanently winter for the first book. The other thing is that while the scene is good enough, there is one thing that does need changing. We need to reveal the Myrddraal to Rand in this episode. The thing is that the Myrddraal doesn't have to show its face, therefore preserving some of the mystery of the show, as Rand sees a hooded figure on a horse and doesn't know what it is. This has a major benefit for later in the episode as well. However, one of the main benefits that we get from this is that by introducing the Myrddraal in a mysterious way now, we don't actually have to show its face for several episodes, meaning savings, as I said before. So, already we're looking good on budget. We've saved a ton of money by cutting 2 expensive scenes. Or rather, replacing a scene from later in the show by having the boys see him. Now, we'd only have Rand see this just as we do in the books, because we're only following Rand when it happens. The next scene we have is again following the books, as it will save us time, money, and better characterize our characters. Which I know is a surprise, but the thing is that none of these scenes needed to be cut or changed. They would go to film just fine, or rather, I mean to video just fine. So we have the boys meet outside the Wine Spring Inn, again as it happens in the books. Though in this rendition, to save on time, we add Perrin to the mix. He should come in slightly later. So instead we have Rand arriving with what he was bringing, delivering it to the Wine Spring Inn. And then we have Matt sneaking up, sharing much about his character. See, I'm going to have to leave a lot of this for when I discuss the characters at the end of this episode, but just know that this will properly introduce Matt, as we have him trying to get Rand into trouble by just sneaking up, tugging on his sleeve, and trying to get him to go get into some mischief. Now, at this point, I think Perrin should come out of the inn with Tam, as he's been asked to help. We get a better characterization for Perrin here, as Perrin is 100% willing to help Rand out, so that they can hang out a little sooner. And then, Matt being caught by Tam ropes him into it as well. I think this shows their friendship much better, properly characterizes each of the characters, and will save a ton of money by not having extras in the background while the 3 characters interact. So, we've already saved, again, more money and better characterized our characters. Now, for this next section of the show, there is a bunch of stuff that needs changing, a lot of which I will talk about in the character breakdowns. It is a matter of dialogue and scene composition. I don't have time to cover it. Just know that while these scenes are, I guess, in the right places, it's also the worst part of the entire episode. I literally don't have time to get to everything. Almost nothing is right here, so I will list them as bullet points real quick, and I will try to cover them again in the character breakdown. So, we have the tavern scene, Matt, Perrin's wife, Moraine's introduction, Nynaeve, Matt's family, Rand and Egwene's relationship, Rand sleeping with her, Rand hawking something, Egwene's dilemma, Egwene, and, of course, that'll take us to the next egregious scene, which is that women's cult in the beginning. Now, here we have this weird scene where Egwene's getting her hair braided, and it simply is not accurate. They're not even conveying something that was in the books or the feeling of something that's in the books. This has nothing to do with anything. It serves no larger plot purpose. It didn't happen in the books. It's expensive, I'm sure, as we have extras, main characters, and a stunt. So we'll be saving a lot of money by avoiding that stunt. And it can be very easily replaced with a much better scene where we have extras simply gossiping. It introduces the village much better and its culture, as well as the women's circle, which is not some funky cult. They're not binding themselves together with each braid. Braiding your hair is just something that you do in the village when you come of age. Honestly, there isn't even a ceremony for it. You just braid your hair, and then you get to join in womanly activities in Beltane. In other words, there's nothing funky going on here. She just came of age, which means that her mom likely would have braided her hair in the inn, no ceremony, no pomp, and we get a much better characterization of the village that is much cheaper. One where we get to reuse our set pieces, which again is even cheaper. So already we've saved a ton of money by making it more accurate to the books. Not only have we saved money, but we've introduced our characters properly and told a better story with more mystery. And that's just the beginning. Because the pool scene is replaced with Moraine just gathering information in the village. The issues with this scene are that, one, we're using a different set, which again costs money. So by reusing the set, we save money. The other two issues with this scene are Nynaeve and Moraine. Moraine is characterized as a little bit of a jerk, when really she is supremely kind. She is very different from a lot of the characters in this show by not being as forceful. Yes, she has great presence, and yes, she can really command a room with her sheer presence, and yes, she can be short and curt with them later. However, while she's gathering information, she is extremely polite, as she is an absolute charitable person who just is trying to make the world a better place. That's a lot of what the Blue Aja has to do with. And so by recharacterizing Moraine, not only do we get a better Moraine, but we also get a better understanding of the Blue Aja. Now, not everyone is a good representation of the Blue Aja, but Moraine is, and so by mischaracterizing her, we misunderstand the world at large. Moreover, Moraine accidentally insults Nynaeve by calling her girl, as she is very young, and Moraine is much, much older than her. However, what we get in the series is this weird backstory that her teacher tried to go to the Aes Sedai or whatever. This is supposed to be a village where leaving the village is a big deal, just like it would have been back in the day. This is where we get into a big part of what was wrong with missing the heart of the series. By mischaracterizing this scene, you'd have done a couple things wrong. Other than mischaracterizing the characters, which is egregious, you've also have this problem where you've lost the heart of the show. See, a big part of what Robert Jordan was trying to do was tell a more accurate story than the stock stories we get. This was turned into a stock fantasy story, one with improper characterization of a country lad and the era that it comes from. See, the thing was that Robert Jordan was clearly very good with history, with cultures, and with, I guess, a little bit of psychology here, as he attempted to showcase what it would really be like for a small town kid to get that call to adventure. And so, by misrepresenting the village, we have misrepresented the world at large. This is a village where apparently people have left before, and they're all offended by the prissy people on the outside. This simply isn't accurate. Nynaeve didn't like Moraine because Moraine called her girl, and Nynaeve is very insecure of herself as a young leader of the village. See, the wisdom is somewhat of a spiritual leader for Emond's Field and the Two Rivers as a whole for each different village. So she's simply in charge of this village, and that makes her somewhat of the head of the women's circle. And again, the women's circle is just a council that leads the village in big decisions. It's their mini form of government for a small town that doesn't have any larger authority. This is great world building that is destroyed in just a few simple sentences. How they missed this, I don't know. Clearly, there was no thought put into this scene, and they just wanted a reason for everything. This is a Hollywood mistake. I don't necessarily need a reason why a character acts the way they do. Sure, we need insight into their character and insight into their upbringing, but not every decision is motivated by some big reason, which is to say that I don't necessarily go to the grocery store because when I was young, I was born in a grocery store. You don't need a backstory for why I go to the grocery store. Sometimes things just make sense. And so giving Nynaeve a big old reason to hate Moraine right off the bat, rather than just having it be a part of her character, was a giant mistake in characterization. I'm sorry for that tangent. We're not on characterization yet. The next scene we have to talk about is the animal remains discovery. This leaves a mystery, so in theory it should be good. The problem is that it is misleading, and therefore it is bad. So I leave myself asking, why were those remains left in a circle? See, these remains are most likely the remains of a Trolloc hunting. However, Trollocs are very simple-minded. They just eat things. So, two things were messed up in this scene. One, I think that, again, while it creates a mystery, that mystery is misleading. There is no cult. This would have just been the remains of Trollocs eating, leftovers. So, by having Lan discover these very obviously strange remains, we take away some of Lan's character. Lan is supposed to be an expert tracker. This should have been a huge discovery for him, as he realizes what these are when someone else might have thought it was a wolf that tore things up or something like that. No one finding these remains in a circle is going to think that it was a wolf pack. So we've taken away from Lan, because now Lan's not a cool tracker. Now Lan doesn't need skill at all. He just happened to wander in the right place. That's lame. But also, as I said, again, they lied to us in that there was no strange ritual happening here. So why were they left in a circle? There's no good answer for why they're like that, other than it should be obvious to the audience. But again, by making it obvious to the audience, we take away from Lan, who would have been the one explaining what he saw to Moraine. Which means that if we left it by the book, not only would we have got more out of the scene, but it wouldn't have misled us, and we also would have gotten, again, better characterization. In fact, there wasn't really a need to showcase this at all. I think it can probably be cut, but if you do feel the need to leave it in, which I don't think it's a horrible idea, as it will give insight to the viewer that maybe there's something in the surrounding area. Of course, the Myrdral showing up to each of the boys would have been plenty to showcase that. So leave it in, cut it, but don't have a weird summoning circle or whatever that was. Okay, this next part didn't happen in the books, but I actually kind of like it. The lanterns as a representation of rebirth, as talked about in the books, gives visuals to what would otherwise just be dialogue. And so I don't mind. It probably cost a bit of money, but I think it was money well spent to avoid just constant narration and character conversations. One of the benefits of having a video is that you can show things on screen, and so why not show lanterns? Again, it didn't happen in the book, but it does several things. It tells us about the belief system in this world. It tells us about the magic system of the cycle of death and rebirth. And it also clues us into the fact that Rand's mom is dead without having to say it. That's not bad. That's pretty good. So I don't think cutting this scene would be an issue, even though it didn't happen in the books. However, I will say at this point that with all the scenes we have cut, we can definitely add Rand carrying Tam to the village and getting the big reveal as Tam mutters in his unconscious stupor. Now, the thing is that the most of this scene can be left the same. Or when I say scene, I mean the rest of the episode, honestly. There's a large chunk of this that can be done right, and the things that aren't done right, I will talk about when it comes to characterization, because the scenes are mostly good. I think how they showcase the One Power is fantastic. I wouldn't change a thing. Now, there is one other part besides not having Rand carry Tam back to the village and learn things that way, is that Nynaeve gets dragged away. Now, I have a suspicion that I understand why they did it. It's because they've changed her character. Now, Nynaeve is very overprotective of her village. In fact, that's one thing that we don't get an explanation of why she's overprotective. She just is really overprotective. And I think that's good characterization. To not have a reason for everything. You don't have to have your family die to become a superhero kind of thing. Now, that was probably a bad example, but I'll move on. I think we should have simply had her tending to the sick, and busy, she doesn't realize that the young protagonists have left the village, and so she follows after. Now, as I said, the mischaracterization of Nynaeve kind of required her to be dragged away, rather than to just go after them because she's protective of them. But also, the other reason why I'm sure they had to drag her away is because they did something else wrong. They didn't have the Myrdral appear to each of the boys. Now, I actually should preface this. I am saying boys, because in the original book, it is the 3 boys that were born around the same time. Now, I'm not going to say that it's a bad thing that they included Egwene in the mix. I can see why they did it, and I'm not gonna tear that apart. There is other things wrong with it, other than the fact that they're allowing the dragon to be born as a girl. I get it, that's fine. However, Egwene is much younger than the boys, which means she doesn't have a chance of being the dragon reborn. Also, Nynaeve is much older, and so they did try to explain that away with Moraine not being sure about how old Nynaeve is, but let me tell you, Nynaeve is 6 or 7 years older than the time she's allowed to be the Dragon Reborn. That's too big of a gap to be confused. Even if they don't keep good records, and even if they do have good memories or whatever, you're gonna know that you're 26 and not 19. Even if you're not sure of the month you were born, even if you're not sure of the year you were born, you're not gonna be 7 years off. Even if she was brought to the village as a 5-year-old, no one would be under the illusion that she was an infant when she got there, even if she was there for 19 years. There's no way that a 7-year gap, I'm sorry, a 6 to 7 years gap, we'll say 6 to be generous. There's no way a 6-year-old is going to show up to your village, or a 5-year-old is going to show up to your village, and you're going to be like, yeah, they're probably an infant. Like, they know around how old she is, give or take only 1 or 2 years at most. At most. Even if she came to the village as a teenager, no one would be thinking that after 10 years, she's still 19. There's no way. There's just no way. That was dumb. And so, with that out of the way, even Egwene, I'm sorry, I didn't get to it. Egwene is too young by 2 whole years. So I again, I get why they included the her in the mix to throw in a little more intrigue, to update it a little bit with some more modern ideologies. However, they ignored a few key things, and more importantly, I would argue that it is unprogressive, and let me explain why before you throw any hate on this. The thing is that in a blundered attempt to be progressive, they had allowed the Dragon Reborn to be born as a woman instead of a man. Like it's a possibility, which in the books it isn't. Now, here's why I think that's a detriment. Because in this case, they replaced Egwene's character, who left for her own motivations because she was a character, because she is a person. They instead made her go along because of plot reasons. Now, we have a lot of great female leads in the book, ones who have characters. However, when you debase a character because you're trying to make them into a girl boss, you you really lose what is important here, is that they're people. Is it really progressive to say that a female can't have a character? I'm sorry, that was weird. Is it really weird to say a woman can't have a character because they're a woman? That they have to be a generic character who does things that are cool because they're a woman? No. I think it is digressive. See, this is the same problem I had with the scene in Avengers Endgame. That the girls just all show up together and that they fight Thanos off as they protect young Spider-Man in a very girl boss way. The thing is that it was so token. It's like, oh, you know what people like? They like girl bosses. Let me throw you a bone here. That's rude. What's important is that these get the love and attention they deserve by getting whole characters. So why is it better to remove her personality in place for making her a main, well, she's still a main character in the books, in place of making her go along as maybe one of the chosen ones? I don't think there's an issue with that, other than the 2 years younger, but the replacing her personality with that's digressive. Why can't we have girls who are girl bosses with their own flaws and make them with their own characters? Are we so bad at writing characters that we can't have a girl boss actually make sense? I think there's a far more progressive way to update this than to simply strip her of her personality. Okay, I was a little worried how that part of it might be received, and so I'm sorry if I rambled a little bit. I wanted to make sure that I was fully understood. And before you throw any hate towards that comment, if I didn't make myself understood, and if some of that sounded sexist, then please ask me in the comments below to clarify, because I would love to help you to understand what my point was. I just really feel like not only was it inaccurate to the books, but it was somewhat digressive. So I hope that made sense, and we'll be moving on. Okay, characters. Let's start with the most egregious one, Matt. Matt didn't feel like Matt. He wasn't funny. Matt's supposed to be hilarious. Here's the thing that I was talking about earlier. With Nynaeve, they had to give him a reason, or they had to give her a reason to be mad at Moraine, or to go along with the journey, rather than just having her do so because she wanted to. Matt, in the same way, is a rogue because his family situation forced him into it. No, that's silly. Matt was a rogue because he was always getting into trouble. The reason why he's so good at sneaking is because he's sneaking behind his parents' back to get into mischief. Whether it's putting flour on dogs and having them run through the village to convince a little boy that there are ghost dogs, or to steal a bit of pie from from the festival and eat it early or something like that. Matt gets into trouble, and that means that he's kind of roguish. I love that he just is the way he is because that's what he does. He's kind of a troublemaker, and that gives him the skills of a rogue, filling that archetype. Now, having a jaded rogue is pretty stock rogue. I mean, think about every rogue character you possibly can. They all are jaded. So why did we take a perfectly original new take on this and make it generic? Again, we're taking the show and making it generic. I distinctly remember Rafe Judkins, I don't know where he said this, but I distinctly remember him saying that he wanted this show to stand out from other shows. He wanted it to be unique, and so he might make some changes to make it unique. So why are we doing the opposite of that by making it generic? Matt can't just be a rogue because he's childish? I think that's hilarious. Not only is it hilarious, but it's original. Unlike Han Solo, who is jaded, oh man, I literally can't think of a rogue that isn't jaded. Let's see. The Dungeons and Dragons movie, we've got a jaded rogue, and that's pretty much built on tropes. I think that this was a horrible misstep. I wish I could, off the top of my head, quote to you more rogue characters that fall into this generic role. So, yeah, sure, let's shove Matt into that and ruin his character. Let's make him not funny, rather than the comedic relief of the book. Now, comedic relief characters are usually the butt of jokes, but in this case, Matt was hilarious as a character without being the butt of jokes. He's the perfect comic relief, and the perfect rogue, all because his character made sense internally. This new Matt makes a certain kind of sense, but it's not good sense. It's not original, and it's not entertaining. Here's the thing that you have to remember. This is... Oops, there we go. This is a TV show, which means it is for our enjoyment, which means that making a character realistic might not be as important as making a character interesting or fun. So, what do we gain from making Matt not funny? Sure, it's a little more serious, but it's also less entertaining. So, by my rewrite, we introduce Matt as a trickster by having him introduced in the way he is in the book, bugging Rand, trying to get Rand into trouble. It also turns them into real friends, something that only one scene shows us in the books, and that scene is predicated on something that doesn't make sense. So, why not have an interesting, funny, and a real badass character in Matt, rather than this slutty thief who is okay. He's not truly a main character, but while we're on this role, Matt's family. First of all, Abell Cauthon is one of the best characters, as in one of the most goody two-shoes, good person. Matt always quotes him when he's going to get into trouble, or or haberdashery or whatever. When he's gonna do something roguish, he usually thinks of his father and goes, my dad would beat me if he caught me doing this, or he would be like, my dad taught me this and I'm sticking to it. Matt acknowledges what a good person his dad is, looks up to his dad, and while Abell Cauthon might have a bit of a mischievous side, the thing is that Abell Cauthon is a good person, and that is huge in later books, who doesn't get characterized very much as his mom. Now, Having his mom a sloppy drunk who's upset with her husband, and then having his little sisters rely on him, it bases their characters as well. Uh, See, the thing is that this was supposed to again be pretty realistic to the setting. And so by having his little sisters okay, there's two parts to this that ruin it. First of all, you ruin the characterization of his family, as his little sisters are goody two-shoes who are constantly ratting him out. I get why they had it. It's a save the cat moment for Matt to make him likable, but if they had just made his character the original way that he was in the books, an original character, then he already would have been likable and we wouldn't have need a scene to endear us to him. In fact, in an effort to save time and money, we probably could have cut out his siblings and mom altogether and just had his dad, who is the most influential person in his life. Now, I get why you wouldn't necessarily do that, but here's where we get to Perrin. See, I think rather than mischaracterizing Matt's family, we could have very easily given Perrin the save the cat moment. Now, if you're not familiar with the literary term, the save the cat moment is when your hero rescues a cat out of a tree to let the audience know that you're supposed to like this character. It's supposed to endear you to them instantly. And so having a character save their little sisters when Trollocs are attacking is a big deal. I just don't see why Perrin couldn't have done it. Now, Perrin doesn't own his own blacksmithing shop. He's an apprentice. They're all young. They haven't started their lives yet, and they're naive. This is a big part of the book. So, changing this by giving Perrin a wife and his own blacksmithing shop doesn't enhance the story, it detracts from the story. Now, I mentioned that by cutting the characterization of Matt's family, you lose a little something in that we would just be cutting them because they're not important. You could have them in there, but their roles aren't big, their characters aren't fully developed. We just know that his little sisters tend to tattle, and his mom is the one that tends to discipline him. His dad also disciplines him, but in a way that he respects a lot more. And so, if you're trying to put in strong female roles, then Matt's family is not the one to do it with. However, on the complete other hand, you have Perrin, who loves his little sisters in the book, so it would be on brand for him to try and protect them, and they would even be in the village at the time because Beltane's happening. So it makes sense that his family would be there, even though he tends to live with the blacksmithing family, because that's how apprenticeship worked back then. It was accurate, and what you're telling is a story with a more old-timey flair. And so to make it make sense is not a bad thing. As long as you clue the viewer in to how this society is different from their own society. Sorry, one second. And so, we could have gotten a strong female lead, or not a lead, I'm sorry. We could have gotten a strong background female character from the blacksmith's husband, who often helps in the forge, like the girl boss that she is. And she is big. She's bigger than most of the men in the village. That's awesome. That's awesome to see something we don't usually see in media, and we didn't see it in this. Why didn't we get just a freaking shredded mother figure for Perrin? I think that would have been a great character to add. That wouldn't have debased it in any way. Rather than throwing in a mischaracterized version of a minor character who had next to no roles in the book. Again, I'm bringing up this concept of being progressive because, well, the books are older, and so they might not have a lot of what today might be considered progressive. It really did have a lot for its time, and this was one of them that I think they missed an opportunity in the show. Also, Perrin's little sisters are sweethearts, and so having them be the ones in danger just feels more right. Not to mention, Perrin having a wife at all, not only does it not make sense, But that role of having that really tough person could have been easily filled by Perrin's mother figure. Now, the other thing here is that they don't die. The blacksmith and his wife are big and strong and tough, and so they survive the fight, as do a lot of people, as Moraine's quick thinking and the hardiness of the villagers show through. I did like that they characterized this in the show, when they had the villagers band together to fight against the Trollocs. However, this doesn't work perfectly, as they had already been mischaracterized, as, well, it kind of appears like they're drunken, maybe a little unkempt, definitely riotous, and at each other's throats, maybe even. The vibe of the village just implies that they would not have band together like that, rather than a cohesive unit of people who share values. That's one of the strengths of this tiny village, and one of the things that is pretty uniquely tiny, old-timey village. So it just didn't make sense to have them band together like they did, rather than in the original way, which was a strong people who didn't realize how strong and stubborn they are. The characterization of the two rivers is a big part of the books, and so by missing it here, they missed a serious opportunity overall. And as I said, giving Perrin the save the cat moment makes way more sense, as Perrin gets a lot less lines. Even in the books, he gets introduced slightly after, and we would really show his careful side, which is a huge part of his character, by saving his sisters instead. So like I said, this doesn't involve cutting a scene and replacing a scene in this version of the rewrite. It just is subtle character differences in both dialogue and who fills what roles in these scenes, even though the scenes would be fundamentally the same. But the characters, however, would be fundamentally different, and that's important. Rand, they didn't do a bad job of. The thing is, though, that Rand is the ultimate goody two-shoes, the Superman, the Shazam, the, I'm thinking of all DC characters at the moment. The point is that Rand is a good boy. That's what a lot of his character is. In fact, it gives a great moment for Matt to tease him at what a good boy he is. Now, this being said, and this having old-timey values, means that in the proper characterization of this village, Rand sleeping with Egwene is scandalous. Now, there's multiple issues besides that. One, again, it mischaracterizes Rand, it mischaracterizes the village, it mischaracterizes Egwene and her parents, who all would have held those values. But even if you take the characterization of the morality of the village out of the equation, it still doesn't make sense. Rand and Egwene's relationship is not that. See, Rand is awkward around her a little bit, as he often is. She is bossy, and eventually they realize that they think of each other more as brother and sister rather than a romantic couple. They're good friends who, at the time, thought that that was going to bloom into a relationship, and then it just kind of fizzled out on good terms because they were never truly together. Sure, because of the way they acted towards each other, and because this is a small village with old-timey values, everyone assumed they were going to get married. This is a big part of their characters, and there is nothing about being wisdom that prevents you from being married. So this is a contrived and silly plot point. Again, pulled out of this weird women's cult that they developed for the show. Instead of just having characters act the way they do because they're people, again, detracting from these characters. And it's weird to me that a lot of these characters that just didn't get personalities rather than personality replacements were the female characters. Why are the women in this show getting shortchanged? Of course, the men are getting shortchanged too, but at least they got replacement characteristics rather than just being indecisive and weird. Is it because they were afraid to give them negative traits? Is it really so bad to think of women as people? Again, I think that there's something digressive in the story writing here. How in Hollywood, again and again, we see that the only way they can write a cool girl character is by taking away any personality that they may have had. Now, I'm over exaggerating a little bit. They have some personality in this, but not nearly as much as they did in the book, and they certainly made their own decisions in the book and were not led by the plot. It's the boys that are dragged into this, and a lot of their characterization comes from them not wanting to go along with it. And so, I don't know, it's very digressive, like I said, not just for women on the whole, but also for the storyline. Man. But honestly, it is tragic to me how they misrepresented the characters. I don't care about the changes where it's like, oh, this happened there, not in this village, but in that village. Whatever. It keeps the essence of what it is. In this, they lost the essence. I feel like the one who got the best characterization was Moraine, followed by Lan, followed by Rand, followed by Tam. And that is basically the only people who got a halfway decent characterization of their character. Everyone else is just completely wrong. Now, I've talked about Perrin only a little bit. Let me expound just slightly more on what I already said by saying, no, I'll get to it in later episodes. Very sorry. Back on track. Let's get to Rand, who I already started talking about, as I just realized. Rand is a good boy, and that's a lot of his character. And so, if you were gonna if you must have a scene of someone sleeping with someone because whatever, it sells or whatever, sure, good writing should take precedence over trying to just throw something in there that's gonna sell, whether it works or not. And give it to Matt, who at least is roguish enough to do something like that. Of course, he doesn't do anything like that till later in the books, but if you have to, then I guess it should have been him. What the heck? Rand was misrepresented, but not as nearly as bad as other characters. As I said, he's probably third on my list for characters who were represented pretty well. And that goes even for background characters. Like I said, Abell Cauthon, what the heck? They could have done so much better with that. Anyway, moving on. Moraine should have been kinder. I already mentioned that briefly before I got to my character breakdowns. She's pretty close, actually. I like how she carries herself. She does a very good job. The actress I felt like did a great job. In fact, I felt like most of the actors in this did a fantastic job. I love who they casted for a lot of these roles. I couldn't see it at first for a lot of them because some of them don't necessarily look like their characters in the book. But I think the actors and actresses did an amazing job of bringing the characters to life as long as they had a good enough script. I can see, though, however, that a lot of them didn't get characters, or they didn't get the right characters. And so that's a bit of a tragedy, because I really feel like had they been given the proper characters, they really would have made them pop. And that is something that I was not prepared to say until I watched the episode. Because I watched a lot of videos. This is just a brief little detour here. I had seen a lot of videos talking about what people thought of the roles that they were given. I'd never seen any of them act, so I couldn't really say one way or another. But now having seen them act, I actually really liked it. So I don't think I would make casting changes. Alright, back on track though. I've mentioned briefly that Egwene was bossy and everything. She is overeager. She has kind of a big head because Nynaeve has told her that she can listen to the wind. And so that makes her special, and she really wants to be special. And she's got a big head, as I said. And when you read between the lines of the book, this means that she's overeager. This gives her a thirst for adventure, like there's something greater than the village. This is good characterization, where you understand the motives of the character, even if you don't like the character. And so, again, give her that character. Let her be a person. Gosh dang it. Okay, back over to Nynaeve. She's young, she's insecure, she is a leader. And being a leader so young, she's used to people looking down on her because she's young. So she's a little insecure about her age. She wants to act older than she is. She does act older than she is, but also it's just a part of her personality to be overprotective, to be stalwart and steadfast. It's a part of that Two Rivers stubbornness, that characterization of that village and the culture that's there. And I don't think representing culture is a bad thing. I think most people who have any love of their own culture would love to see a proper representation of their culture in film adaptations. Now, these aren't real ethnic groups or cultures. However, we could have an opportunity here to show cultures characterized, rather than just having it one-dimensional. This is something that the books do brilliantly, and I've kind of drifted over to the characterization of the village, which is an old-timey goody-two-shoes village of stubborn people with very old traditions. I don't see why we couldn't have had that in this part of the story. I get that they wanted to add in some of the scandal, some of the roguish flair that's popular today, but there is a ton, and I mean a ton of cultures that are represented in the books that could have shown us that side of things and had that more Game of Thrones adult content. Of course, I'm glad that they didn't make it explicit, as we do. It is nice that it is available to younger viewers. Although they did have to throw some of it in there, which I felt like was unnecessary. But again, there was still other villages that could have filled that role. And so it was a shame that they ruined the culture that we see in the books for a scene, two scenes, for honestly one episode. They leave after one episode, so they couldn't avoid it for a single episode just to give proper characterization to the village. That's a shame. Now, by mischaracterizing Moraine, I do want to bring up that they mischaracterized Aes Sedai in general as mysterious and powerful. Everyone just kind of gets angry when they see Moraine as an Aes Sedai. Sure, they have a moment of awe in the beginning, but most people are like, ugh, Aes Sedai, ugh, Aes Sedai. And that's the only thing we see. Where was the mystery? Where was the, oh my gosh, Aes Sedai? This is so strange, this is so weird. Was there really a problem giving mystery to the show? I would argue that it would have made for a better hook. Okay, now with the characterization, I wasn't able to stay on track very well, but that about sums up my episode. That's my rewrite. That's what they got wrong with the characters, and where they really could have fixed it by having different scenes or just changing minor things that those, or minor roles that those characters play in the scenes to better characterize it and honestly tell a better story. I hope that I impressed upon you the big difference between the way they wrote it and what it could have been. Between the generic story that they gave us and the unique story that it could have been, along with unique characters who have motivations and personalities. If we had kept those alive, we could have seen dynamic roles. Then that sums up this episode. I think with the next episode... Oh, okay, I'm sorry. It does sum up the episode. However, I did want to say I thought it was really cool how they did the prologue of the books in the form of having Moraine say it as they left the village. I thought that was fine. That could have stayed. I guess I'll see you next week when I watch that video. I'm only going to be doing one a week, but I'm going to try and catch up here. I'm going to watch next week's video, and I'm going to make another one just like this. We'll see how the show progresses as I get used to what I'm doing and figure things out within my limited time frame. So, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.